I'll call the meeting to order. It's 7:04. And the first item on the agenda is to review and the approval of the minutes. Have you had a chance to see the minutes?
Yes, I have.
And, Brian?
I have.
Just have one question. Is there a person missing
May I
off
speak?
of that list?
I think
James
so.
Sapansky?
I'm
James?
looking at him right here, I think, I
Jim
just noticed
Sapansky?
that.
He was
Yeah.
a parent rep. I don't see his
Jason
name
Mansky.
on here.
Jason?
J-A-Y,
Yep.
Samansky,
Oh, Jason.
S-Z-Y,
It says James here.
M-A-N-S-K-I,
M-A-N-S-K-Y again?
S-K-I.
I.
Yeah, he wasn't on here, so I don't know.
But you were
whether-
not here last
He
time.
wasn't
No,
here.
I was
last
not here
year,
No.
but
last
there was
year.
somebody else here that I
There was-
noticed was not here
He
on the
was,
list.
I
It
don't
was a
remember.
parent.
It was a
Parent?
Just
parent,
sitting,
yeah.
he was just
Yeah.
here to watch.
Yeah.
These
Oh.
are open to the public.
Yeah,
Okay.
But I didn't catch his name.
I did,
forget.
now I forget it.
Jay, I will add you to the meeting.
There's so many people. If he's sitting in the child.
I'm not getting fresh, but I just double.
Have a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes for the last meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Excuse me, according to Robert's rules, you have to open it up for discussion. I have some questions on the minutes.
Sorry.
These are for 15 September, correct?
Right.
Yep.
Okay, and item 1, motion was made and seconded to approve the minutes. I think in the future, at least, we should have the names of the people who made the motion and who seconded it. Also, should be noted whether the minutes were approved or delayed or whatever. On section 2, page 2, we also have in the third paragraph, motion was seconded and carried unanimously. Again, I think we need to, at least in the future, include the names of the people who made the motion and who seconded it. Those are my comments.
Any other comments? I agree that the notes from the meeting should, the person making the motion should be included, and the person making the second should also be included in the,
And the vote recorded.
and the vote. Any other?
Do you have the names for the
No, I
one we
was just
just
gonna
did?
ask that question. I couldn't, I was looking down when I heard the.
You
Was
said
So,
the-
Cliff and
Cliff
and Chris, right?
and Chris,
Okay,
yeah.
that's-
You made the motion.
Yes, yes, I did.
So maybe when we motion, maybe you could say your name too, just because I'm assuming
Thank you, that
that
would help
there's a
me
lot of
just-
people, so we say motion in your name as well.
Just for a little bit, and then I can review that.
So you're all set with Cliff and
Yep.
Chris?
Yep.
Okay. Hearing no other comments, I'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The next item on the agenda is an update on the CM at risk process and the designer contract. The designer contract was approved by the Board of Selectmen, and the CM at risk process was also voted. Andrew?
We have the designer contract agreement executed by Whittier and Dorr here tonight. We have 5 executed copies. Also, like you said, we approved on 9/19, I think it was the CM at risk, and the application is drafted right now, and I am going to need some assistance from the district to make sure that I have the appropriate names listed on the application, and I'm not sure if anyone would volunteer to help me. But maybe it's just something I can do with you, Debbie, over the phone.
Yeah, why don't we just do that?
It's a pretty large document, and there's a
Yeah.
couple, and I have
Yeah.
everything highlighted that needs
Yeah.
to be answered.
Yeah, that's all we have.
Right, I think that one was an older version, but,
Okay. So you can just show me the page,
Yep.
and I can
We'll can
see this
do it.
online and you
Yep,
can
I
do
can
it.
either do
Sure.
it on the phone or come to your office and we
No,
can
no,
visit
it's
it.
the phone is easier.
So that'd be the next step. We needed the designer agreement to be executed, which now is executed, and now the next step is to submit this And we will be doing that next week. We'll be working on that and getting that done. So that's that for that meeting, the notes. And I think the next thing, do you want to go to the next item? Or does anyone have any questions in regards to the next steps?
Just one.
Can we just make one thing? Technically, we go by Pine Grove School, and I know some of the documents are saying Pine Grove Elementary School. I don't know if that's something we should revise in documents. And that's Emma. I don't know if you need my name.
I have your name, yes.
Also PGS, right?
Yes, so otherwise known as PBS.
Yes.
But we're typically Pine Grove School, not Pine Grove Elementary.
Right,
Right.
easier abbreviation.
Okay.
And just to remember on the point that the contracts are executed with the town of Raleigh,
With Raleigh.
not the
Correct.
Triton Regional District.
You want to add something, Brad?
I was just gonna say, once you get those contracts kind of all together and wrapped up with a bow, we should send one of those, an original, to Mercy
Yes.
Yeah.
as soon as we can,
Mercy's from MSBA.
right? Because then she can put that in her file
File.
cabinet,
Her
and
Checks off the
originals
box.
file.
that makes her
Yes.
happy, and that's good.
Right.
Which we'll be working on that as well. So we'll have that done all next week. Okay. I would like to reverse the order of number 4 and 5 and maybe start with where we are with the designers and the due diligence, because they have been out here for the last 2 nights, right? Wednesday and Thursday doing some existing condition surveys, and I wanted to have Brad give everyone an update of where we stand. And then we'll talk about milestones in the end.
So not because I'm lazy, but I'm actually gonna introduce John Richardson, okay, who is our project manager on this job. John lives right around the corner, so, you know, he can be here. He's a 24/7 guy. We'll give you his cell phone number. But actually, John, why don't you can go through just kind of what we're doing, and, you know, we've been bothering, you know, everybody here for the last couple of days, but
Right.
we're making some good progress.
Yes, we accidentally got to go to open house night.
I heard a lot.
But yes, I live in Wenham, so I'm very happy. I've worked on a bunch of schools, but never one right next door. And I'll be your project manager on the project throughout and coming to all these meetings. Over the last 2 days, we've had a team of our engineers, both architects and all the different disciplines, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural,
Hazardous.
hazardous materials sampling, come and look at the building, because the first step of this process is to assess the existing physical condition. So we've done some observation, and then we'll type that up and kind of review that, and that will kind of proceed in a parallel track to also educational program confirmation. And without stealing too much of Brad's
Sure.
thunder, you know, you understand that we're pursuing the limited scope repair pathway, which is still being defined, but will largely involve trying to reuse the existing building shell and not move pieces, certainly not move many walls, as much as possible, while still getting you a you know, an essentially revitalized and fully functional school at the end.
So if you remember what we were, excuse me, talking about at the last meeting, was that 2 of the big ticket items with respect to going down the LSR pathway are, 1, to have a confirmation essentially that the structure is good. And then the second one is, you know, that we're not deviating too far from the educational program. And we're gonna meet on, when did we say, the 11th?
11th, 18th.
We're gonna meet on the 11th, 18th, and the 1st, really to start getting into some more nuts and bolts in that with Brian and Christine, so that we can understand, you know, how the program's working, really, you know, get into it a little bit, what's working, what's not working, and then taking that and also doing what we're doing right now is not only are we looking at the entire building with the engineers, but we're also, Chris was good enough to get us the drawings that you have, so we've used that. We've actually in our office redrawn, or we were, like, the first floor was redrawn and 2/3 through the second floor at about 1 o'clock today. So hopefully they'll have that done. So now we're up and running, you know, on the computer. And then what our team is doing is we're spot verifying dimensions so that we can confirm that actually what was in the plans is what's happened in the field. You know, even as, you know, in your most recent edition, it's 1988. Excuse me, all that was drawn by hand, so you have no CAD plans. That would've been nice, you know, we could have missed a step there, but it's okay. So we'll have that all redrawn. We sat with Christine today to verify, you know, what's going on in each one of those rooms. So if it's a, you know, it says 6th grade on the plan, is it actually 6th grade? So we're gonna go and put all that into the plan, get the square footage from the measurements, and then what we'll start to do is we'll start to develop what we call our red, green, yellow analysis to go and see how close are we right now from a space utilization perspective to what the MSBA guidelines are. And so we'll start to go and say, you know, are we undersized, are we right-sized, or are we oversized? And then that will factor into, you know, overall, not only from a educational delivery perspective is the program working, but then also from a space perspective, is it consistent with what MSBA is looking for. MSBA, you know, when you get into a renovation project, they do understand, you know, that you're not gonna be dead nuts on the space all the time. So that there is, you know, some wiggle room, let's say, in terms of, you know, if you have a guideline that says classrooms should be 950 square feet, and we're at 900 square feet, that's probably gonna be okay. If we're at 500 square feet, that's probably gonna be something that we're gonna have to talk to them about. But generally speaking, I think we look pretty good overall, so there's some good news there. But we're gonna march down the road and get that together for our meeting so that we can start to really get that educational program, get that confirmed. Because that's one of the two, right? So good news is, at least preliminarily, what we have back from the structural engineer after his tour is that we don't see any glaring structural issues, which is, I think you already knew. You know, there are some things out there that we'll probably have to take care of, but, you know, in terms of what I call stoppers, we don't see anything out there right now that would preclude us going down the LSR pathway from a structural perspective, so that's really good. So we'll take that, marry that up with the educational program and see what we go. And we should be able to, in fairly short order, you know, sometime, you know, I'm guessing by, you know, mid to late October, have a good sense as to whether or not, you know, which path we can go down. And, you know, we'll have to work with you, Brian, and you know, your team to make sure that programmatically it's all working for you. But, so that's good, you know, we've made some pretty good progress in, you know, a fairly short amount of time. And, you know, we'll go back to the lab and start to write all of that stuff up, get all of the engineering reports together, you know, start to understand what's good and what's bad, and then we'll start to, you know, look at different types of options and how we might approach the renovation of the building. You know, when we talk about different types of mechanicals, and different types of HVAC deliveries, that's a real big one. Electrical is relatively straightforward. Plumbing, maybe not quite, but pretty straightforward. HVAC is the big one. And really understanding, you know, how we're going to approach it. Right now, you have unit ventilators. Typically, we wouldn't go at a unit ventilator type approach in a building. But, you know, we'll have to understand a little bit what the floor-to-floor is here and, you know, how we might approach it. And the engineers, will be working with them to understand that a little bit more. So that's about where we are right now. You know, in the last week. We've been busy, and, you know, we're gonna keep busy. We're gonna talk a little bit about schedule later, and, you know, we can get into how, you know, that step, and excuse me, some of these other steps factor into the, you know, end game and what that, you know, looks like in our crystal ball right now.
Okay.
Any questions for anybody?
Can I just clarify, when we keep saying educational program, so that's again how education is delivered in the school setting. So there's actually a document called the educational program that we have to submit to the MSBA. That process started with Christine and
Back in July.
back in July. I think it was more than just the two of you, and there was 7 or 8 of you.
There was 6 or 7 of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Teachers, educators in the building that sat around and went through all the format. It's a very prescriptive format that the MSBA gives you to identify all the needs, all the spaces, and how they're being utilized. So, you know, when we're meeting, I suppose we could open that up to other folks if there are other folks who are interested in being part of those discussions when we're meeting on the 11th, 18th, and 1st.
Sure.
I mean, it's literally just talking about how education is delivered today, and can we remake the building in a way that allows us to continue doing what we want to be doing. So,
Yeah,
make sure that's clear.
And we're going to really want to identify, you know, things that are working well for you today, things that, you know, may not be working quite the way that you want them to work. And then, you know, if we, you know, start to look forward, you know, what might you want to do if you weren't limited by the walls that you're sitting within today? And then we're gonna figure out, you know, what would we maybe need to try and change, and how would we go about that with the understanding that we're trying to minimize the amount of disruption in the building. You know, MSBA said, you know, we don't want you removing walls, but at the same time, I would hope that we would have a discussion, you know, to be able to go and solve, you know, a big problem. If we had a little problem that we had to move a wall that wasn't a structural wall or something like that, and it's a real simple fix, you know, but we can do a lot of good with that. I'd like to be able to have that discussion. We're gonna have those types of discussions with them at our kickoff meeting, when we have that, which hopefully, we're trying to schedule that for the 11th right now. We'll see what comes back with them, but, you know, so we can set the tone of what the overall approach to this LSR is, you know, and give them some information, and then understand a little bit about what their schedule is. And we'll talk a little bit about that later.
Does the educational program also include extracurricular and community use of the building?
It can, you know, right now, the way that, at least we understand the way MSBA is looking at this pathway, is that you have a relatively broad license to go and, you know, call the spaces different things, so long as it fits within your educational program, right, that's devised by the educators. And you're not doing a whole bunch of changes with the walls and the structure of the building. In other words, if you wanted to call this, instead of, you know, a library, and you wanted to reconfigure what's going on in these four walls to make this more of a community media center or something along that line, and it still worked for your program, I don't think there's any problem with it. But we're gonna have to get into it a little bit with them to see, you know, how much they're willing to bend. But we also talked with Christine a little bit today about, while we have, it's all lots of notes and stuff on it, but, you know, you can see the generic outline of your building here, and it's configured this way. There may be some different ways that we can realign it without having to change things that might ultimately be beneficial. And, you know, if you were moving into a new building today, or we were designing a new building, a lot of times what we try and do is we try and take the academic portion, okay, and put it together. And then you can have, well, you know, with your specials and some of the more community use-oriented types of spaces, and have them, you know, in a different area. And maybe if we're reshuffling the deck and everything works space-wise, we don't know yet, we may be able to accomplish that within the walls that we have. And that helps you from a lot of different ways, you know, from lockdown, security perspectives, to off hours, usage, lots of different things that you can go and accomplish with that. We haven't got that far yet.
Okay. And that's what will be discussed in the meetings on the 11th, 18th, and 1st?
Yes,
Okay.
we're gonna start that.
Got it.
We're gonna get the background on it, and then we're gonna go and figure out, you know, where you're trying to get to, and then we'll see, you know, how much we can do with the Ouija board there.
Yeah, so just as we're assessing the building to see if the physical structure is suitable to be reused, the educational programming, and this will be to review that educational program and see that it is a match for this building. Because basically the MSBA wants to make sure that they go forward and support a project that, as Brad said, generally meets their standards and you know, is defensible as a school 10, 20, 30 years from now, and they don't compromise the function going forward based on, well, we were renovating the school, so we didn't do X, Y, and Z.
Okay?
Okay,
Back to you, Andrea.
back to me. We'll hold the milestones for a second. The cost, I think it was Dennis that may have asked the question about the cost breakdown appropriation. And Margaret made a chart, and just wanted to share that with you so that you knew. It's this form right here. just shows the appropriation that was approved by the town in the value of $800,000, and then it shows the owner project manager's contract amount at $227,500, and then the designer's base contract at $425,000. And then environmental site and testing, which is the hazardous materials, soil testing, and any reimbursables. And then we have the construction manager, which is the pre-construction cost for when we do bring on board the CM. There will be some costs associated with the pre-construction services to help us with the estimating and making sure that we have the right budget associated when we submit our preferred schematic design. And then there's a remaining appropriation of $49,500. So just want to make sure that everyone understood the breakdown of the cost to date. Make sense?
So that's the estimate is the total, you think, or is that just the first stage, the 70 grand?
Do you want to?
That's the first
Part?
That's their pre-construction service.
I have an email.
No, I have the email, the email is different.
Sorry.
The email's different?
That's the one that I have.
Oh, well, this one is.
That's the real
This
one.
is the.
Where did you get that?
I don't know, I haven't seen
Because
that
I
one.
got this
Brian
from
sent
Barbara
it to
Wood
me.
from Monday.
I sent it to you? Let me see it.
It just has a different number.
What is it?
I like this one better.
Mark, oh, it's got the educational program in there, any costs. I think Margaret had that in there initially.
Yeah.
And she took it out, I don't know.
Okay, good, okay.
I didn't create them, sorry.
Okay. All right.
So what is the soils testing for? What's the purpose of that? Just
Well, there's potentially a couple things. One thing, depending upon when we get into trying to better understand what's going on with your septic tank, we might have to do some testing there. And then the other thing is, and this is a bigger discussion, but, because right now LSR doesn't contemplate outside of the building. However, you do have some issues outside of the building, just from accessibility, kind of your front area there, those types of things. And if you were to go and look at, parking or site circulation, you'd probably want to go and get a little geotechnical work done in advance just to make sure that you don't have any issues there. So usually what ends up happening is there's some type of allowance that's set aside for that in case you have to go and do that. We're not there yet, but it's good to have that. Particularly, anything under the dirt is always a little scary. So the more you can, understand it, the better off we're going to be able to estimate it, and then the less surprises we'll have down the road.
Are they gonna allow us to do the parking lot? I mean, would you say that it's limited to the building? I mean, the biggest part, or not the biggest part, but one of the parts of improving this building obviously is the site design.
Right now, we don't really know. If you took everything that we've heard thus far, the answer would probably be no. That doesn't mean that you couldn't do it on your own, but it might not be a reimbursable cost. But again, those are the types of things that we want to have that discussion with them about, because I think some of this is probably evolving a little bit. Is it something that you could call your septic system a system that's directly related to the building, even though it's outside, even if you're not necessarily getting into your leach field? Is that something that would be considered? Maybe. We have to have that discussion.
But if we feel that the parking lot situation in the circulation is important, could we go to the core program if it needs to go that way to
Sure.
include that?
Absolutely.
I mean, because you really don't want to do half the work, because really the parking situation, I think, is pretty bad, so.
Yeah, you can, when we go through all of this, it's gonna be at your option whether or not you wanna pursue LSR, or whether you wanna pursue core, for whatever reason. So you're always going to have that option.
We're in the core program.
You
We've been
are.
accepted
Right.
in the core program. We have LSR or core now is the decision.
Right.
It doesn't make sense that the LSR would not include something like the septic system, because without septic, the building doesn't run. So it doesn't make sense that wouldn't be included as part of the cost. Traffic, I get, but
That's the
Still part of the
argument
functioning
that's the
system.
argument we would make.
Yeah.
But in a lot of even core programs, for example, if you have a larger facility that is not on sewer and it's on septic but would require pre-treatment, right? Pre-treatment isn't covered okay, under a core program. It just isn't.
So
So there's-
at
there's-
the high school, we have a
That's
wastewater
crazy.
treatment plant, so that was not reimbursable in that
Yeah,
project.
there's these little idiosyncrasies that's just the way that it is.
As this goes on, you'll become more and more
Yeah.
familiar with the idiosyncrasies of what's reimbursable and what's not.
But the good news, I guess, and this is why you've hired us, right, is we're pretty familiar with those things, you know, so that we don't go down and get you all excited about that it's gonna happen, and then we give you that 11th hour surprise. There are gonna be some 11th hour surprises, there always are, but we'll be able to pick most of those ones off for you.
Okay.
But the challenge is, LSR is brand new. So
Right.
even with all of Pink's and Durham Whittier's experience with the MSBA, this is brand new territory that things where we all along have said, you know, outside it was like up to 8%.
Yeah, 8% was
outside.
said, yeah.
I think up to 8% of the total cost outside the structure was reimbursable. So now we're learning new things.
Well, and we'd emailed, I think Christine and you and I had emailed about the possibility of getting some external funding from grants from the Institution for Savings or from other, you know, community-based, you know, businesses that might like to have, you know, the Institution for Savings Traffic Circle or, you know, whatever, you know. I don't know if anybody wants to give them septic system at the school, but, you know, you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. But if that
That's
could be a
right.
possibility for other things that we want, if we could pursue additional funding from community businesses and what have you.
Well, if we go through the core program, would the site work be reimbursable or no?
Up to 8%.
Up to 8%.
Up to 8%.
8%?
Of the total
Oh,
cost.
okay, you just said that, okay.
And when is the date that we have to make that decision where we're stuck in a path? Is there,
Well, maybe we should get them scheduled.
Yeah, well, look, we might as well just talk about schedule.
Yeah.
We've got a
I have
handout
some.
here for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here's one, you have one there.
Send us 2 ways here.
Don't hurt yourself in the turn.
So let's come back to that question after we've kind of gone through this, if that's okay. So the first thing I'll say is, this isn't final. We don't really know. We're doing a little guessing here, but what we tried to do is we sat down with Margaret and Andrea in our office and just started to look at what we have to accomplish, what the big ticket items are, and then look at some of the, you know, hard milestone dates out there that we know of. And so what we said is, we know that your objective here is to try and understand what the costs are prior to your Springtown meeting, which is in early May, correct? May 9th?
May 1st.
May 1? That's really early
That's
May.
the election.
We just lost 8 days.
Yeah.
The election's May 9th.
Oh, that's the election.
For
We
the
need that
override.
still on there.
Okay,
We need the vote, that's the vote.
okay, but you need to get to May
We
1.
need to get to
May 1's
May-
the first one,
May
before you
1
get
is
to the
the
second
one.
one. So let's say May 1. So then we said, okay, in the best case scenario, right, what you would like to have is you would like to have not only what the cost is, so that you can get all of that together, and you're gonna need that, I know, before May 1.
I'll need that in March or early April.
Yeah.
Well, we have
March
we-
15th.
Right,
It
it's,
sounds like
it's still the March.
Well, let's just kind of, we haven't knocked down those specific dates, but we know you're gonna need it before, and now we know it's March, early April.
45 days, right?
And then we said, okay, but what you really want to do is you really want to have the MSBA folks saying, we're on board. Because then you're able to go to the town and say, not only is this a great thing for the town in terms of the project, and, you know, here's the pictures, and here's all the good things that are going to happen with this, but we also have our partner, the MSBA, which is committed to funding 47 or 48 or whatever that percentage is, and you have that in hand. And that's a good thing. It's always helpful as you know, your selling point when you're trying to raise millions of dollars. So in order to accomplish that from the MSBA's perspective, we still need to be able to make a submission to them so that their board can vote on the number. Okay, and we'll come back and talk about, you know, the FAS and how some of the things in the LSR program, but suffice it to say that we still have to make that submission, and in order to meet, okay, that May and I don't even know if we can make I think their board meeting is after May 1. But let's just say that it's right on May 1. You have to make a submission to them in March, which would be March 23rd. And that's that red box there, the one out on the outside. We're going to schedule backwards. So what we said is, if that's the case, in order to get the MSBA on board in May, and to be able to support your town meeting date in May, we need to have all of our work done by March 23rd, because that's when we've got to put our book in. So it means that we have to have all of the feasibility work done, all of the existing conditions done, we have to have the program verified, we have to have met with the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee and had a positive response from them. We need to have prepared the schematic design, we have to have gone through all of the options, all of that stuff, and then estimated whatever that preferred option is, and submit that to the MSBA March 23rd. So then, we actually started working backwards from there. And we also have these other meetings with MSBA that have hard and fast dates. And one of the things that I think we talked a little bit about at the last meeting that's different from the core program pathway is that instead of having the MSBA board vote to approve the project to go into schematic design, they're really looking at having the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee, have a positive reaction to that, in lieu of having to have the MSBA board voted in. We don't know exactly how that all is going to work yet, but that's when we have more discussions with them. But that's the idea, at least as it's been explained to us, and I think that's the same thing that you had at your meeting as well. So
The
then
meeting is May 10th.
Pardon?
The board meeting is May 10th.
Their board meeting is May 10th? Okay.
So it's the day after.
So, then we said, okay, well, when does the FAS subcommittee meet? And they don't actually have anything that would help us support there. So what we said is, perhaps what we could do is, we could talk to the MSBA about trying to have a FAS meeting sometime in December, because the other project that we're working on is also an LSR project. They're working under the same schedule. And maybe they could have a special FAS meeting in December and address those two projects. We don't know if they would be willing to do that or not. But if they were, and we could have that in December sometime, then we think that we can do the work that we have to do, still follow their schedule, and meet this March 23rd deadline in order to have a May MSBA board vote. It doesn't help you in the fact that you're having yours on May 1st and they're having theirs on May 10th. So if all of that theirs is pretty much hard and fast in stone and isn't going to change, and maybe yours is too. But if that's the case, then ultimately I guess what happens is you guys could go forward, you would still have the price, you could go and seek approval of the project and the funding, and then you would have it in hand, hopefully, and then, they would go and approve it, hopefully at the May 10 meeting. And if your May 1 can't move and their May 10 can't move, that's probably what's gonna happen. So it's off by about 10 days. But it wasn't because we were late. So that being said, if you just now will work from left to right, like we normally would, right now, we're trying to set up a kickoff date for an MSBA meeting of the 11th. We proposed that. We haven't heard back yet. We just talked a little bit about program verification, and that's actually, that bar is shifting a little bit to the right. So because we talked about that being, our meeting somewhere out, we said 11/1 would be our last meeting. So that's moving out just a little bit. But still, in line with what we need to do to support our PDP submittal, which is fine. Facilities assessment, we talked a little bit about that tonight. We've done pretty much all of our field work. We're probably going to have to come back, one more time to do a little catch up on some things we might have missed. But for all intents and purposes, now everybody's going back and doing their write-up, and that's gonna happen over the next 4 to 5 weeks. At the same time, okay, what we've talked with our engineers and with our team architecturally is we're starting to now look at, based on our field review, what types of options would we have with respect to different types of mechanical systems, different approaches to the envelope, and those types of things. So we're starting to go and put that, what if? What if we went down this path? What if we went down this path? And what would those various options look like? And, there may be a whole bunch of different combinations with those, and we're gonna try and organize those, and, maybe it ends up being some type of matrix, and we'll be working back and forth with this committee to go and say, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, until we get that honed in to a point where we're pretty sure that we think we like, door number 2, whatever that option happens to be. At the PDP stage, under a normal core program, you're not required to go and make a selection. You're just presenting different options.
But you're charged with developing a number of alternatives.
Correct. And they're very different under a core program, because you'd have new, you'd have renovation addition, you'd have strict renovation, and lots of permutations there. So they're just saying at PDP, typically in a core program, PDP submission, you would just put all that out on the table. And you have some very high-level estimates of what some of those various options would be. But you're not making a selection. The next step typically would be to go and do what they call a preferred schematic report. And that's really just starting to refine those options that you identified in the PDP and start to go and get it to a point where you say, this is the one we want. But because this is a different type of approach, I think that we can condense that and try and get to a point, hopefully, where we can say, based on everything we've seen, here are all of those different options, and here's the one that we think we like. If we do that and get that at PDP, then we would be able, in a position to try and support, and I know I'm using a lot of acronyms here, I'm sorry, right? PDP means
Preliminary design.
Program. Yeah, sorry. It's basically this list of options. And then FAS is Facilities Assessment Subcommittee, which is a group of MSBA and people that they've brought in who may not be MSBA staff. Traditionally, it's to evaluate your program. That's really what they do. They're in the education program evaluation business. So it's a little bit different here, because our objective here is to say we're not changing the program too much. So it's going to be interesting at that meeting with them the first time.
Yeah, and because they haven't really done it before.
Right.
Either, but probably their role is going to be sort of reversed in terms of ensuring from the MSBA's point of view that this is a project that meets their overall standards for education. And we'll run into this in a number of ways. That's what they'll be focused on, is the educational spaces, and that what's being proposed meets what you have defined in your educational program as your educational needs.
And we don't know exactly how it's going to go yet, because it's never happened. And I think they probably don't know how it's going to go yet either, but we'll figure it out as we go along. But if we do what I'm suggesting here, we would be in a position at least to meet with them in sometime in December, if they'd be willing to do that, which would then allow us enough time, if they're on board with what we're presenting, to go and do the schematic design of the project, based on what we think is the preferred approach, in order to support that March 23rd deadline. So, the schedule is tight, it's doable, it's not compromising in the sense of, that we're not gonna have enough time to figure out what it is we wanna do. Because if we ever get to that point, and we're gonna tell you that we think we need more time to come up with what we think is the right thing for you to do. And, we'll keep you apprised of that as we go along. We all know that we're trying to do this in a fairly condensed time frame, but I've heard you say, we don't want to sacrifice the quality of what we're trying to go and get done here, just in the sake, of getting it done faster.
And these are the same steps that the standard program goes through, and so to your earlier question, the PSR stage, that's where we would really know whether we're staying on this limited scope repair project or whether we're gonna go back into the core program. Because depending on the scope of that preferred program, that will let you and the MSBA evaluate where you are relative to their expectations for the LSR program.
So that would be somewhere in December?
I
according to
think
the
at the
schedule?
FAS meeting, right, when we sit down with the FAS folks, Facility Assessment Subcommittee, we will know at that point which direction we think we should take. We will know after that meeting whether or not they agree with that. And we'll have a very good sense, okay, as to whether or not we think we should be continuing with the LSR pathway, or whether there's just too much compromise that's being asked of you, or there's some fatal flaw that we don't know about yet that would force us back to the core. Examples of that might be that you really come to the conclusion that you want to modify your program such that, you know, you're changing some things around and it doesn't square with the MSBA folks. Or you say, you know, we really want to take care of some of these things outside the building, and, you know, we don't want to, you know, not be reimbursed for those, that we would prefer to pursue that as a core program. Those are a couple of examples of why you might go outside. I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, I'm just saying that those are, you know, some things that might kick you to the other. Or if we came back and, you know, I reneged on my comment earlier about the structure being good and we found that there were problems, you know, that would also be something that would be a fatal flaw. But we don't see that yet. And, you know, just based on some of our early discussions on program, I don't know if I see that yet either. I think that all looks okay right now.
So basically, what you have to do is you have to come up with some recommendations and present them to the MSBA for approval, and still meet our target deadline. I think, you know, if we work from a point of view, from my perspective, is that, yes, we'd like to get it for the spring meeting. But we're going to have a fall special town meeting coming up in 6 weeks this year. We typically run a fall town meeting. So that, you know, don't let things get so tight that, you know, you know, if we have to slide the schedule,
Yeah, right.
we can work it.
Right.
We have some flexibility.
So-
Some.
We'll know, you know, we'll have a pretty good sense, you know, in 6 to 8 weeks where we are, I think.
On your schedule,
Yeah.
I think you made a mistake. You jumped from 11:14 to 12:21.
That's
Was that 11:21?
This is Andrea's schedule.
Okay. Is there,
Margaret, since she's not here. Yeah, that's 11:21.
is there any period of shutdown between, you know, Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day that, you know, they shut down for a week or 2 weeks or whatever type of a thing?
Who's that?
MSBA.
Well,
There is this-
MSBA,
yeah.
that's what there isn't currently an FAS meeting scheduled in December. They don't have anything in it. That's the one we would have to ask to see if they'd be willing to do that. And we don't know. But they're still working.
Okay, so they typically continue to work?
Oh, yeah.
Like on,
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
They
When
would,
do-
but there's a very long lead time, and it's gotten longer, between when a submission needs to be delivered to them as a complete package from your design OPM team, and when they actually officially approve it. And that's on their website.
Just like on this last one, in order to facilitate their May 10 board meeting, we have to have everything to them March
6 weeks.
23rd.
Right.
6 weeks in advance.
And it's going to 8.
Right.
So, yeah, they're still working. They got a lot of time to review it, though.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Now, you said that the FAS meeting is not typically held in December?
No, sir.
When is it typically?
They have them on their website, and they schedule them almost a year in advance. And it just so happens that in that period, they don't have one. The next one that they had, I believe, was sometime out in January.
Yeah, it was like the
10th.
first, the 10th, or yeah, it was the 10th.
That was the first one, and there's a big gap.
Is that the facilities assessment?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
like a big
Yeah.
gap
Like
from
January
like
10th and-
November
There's
to
they're like
January.
Usually they're every 2 months, but
Yeah.
then with the holidays, that gets.
Right,
There's an October, then there's a,
right.
There's nothing until,
January, right?
right? Is it February?
there's a, I don't know how to
Yeah.
read that schedule.
February 1st?
Yeah,
You read that. The January,
so we're gonna have 17, so, yeah, October to January, because they're pairs. They do like 2 days.
oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's a
So there's
big,
2 in October.
it's just a
and
bad,
there's
we
January.
fall
one
into a
January,
bad
February.
cycle there.
Okay.
So that's why I was saying, maybe we could see if they would be willing to go and do something in December. They may say absolutely not, and then we don't.
Right,
That's it.
right.
So that was our, like I said, when we first looked at this, we said, what do we need to do to achieve it? And, we're gonna do our best, and then, like I said, some things have to fall into place. If they don't, we'll report back. If we feel like we're going too fast, either for us or for you, we'll tell you that too. Recognizing that, this is a one-shot deal. You wanna do it right.
Right. And where it is, the LSR is a new program for them,
Yep.
that they might be willing to go for the December meeting.
Potentially, well, if you don't know if you don't ask.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about, I guess this is kind of big picture for me, not having been involved in an MSBA project before, but I didn't realize there were so many subcommittees and main committees involved here. Since LSR is new and we're hearing from you a lot of, well, this is their first time tackling it, they have to figure out how to do it. Is there a guiding force within MSBA that's kind of helping shape that, or is it literally up to each individual subcommittee to handle it as we're coming up on their date for a meeting? How is that?
That's such a dangerous question. To be honest, I think they have an idea of what they're trying to do, and I think the idea is well-founded and sound. I think procedurally, I think there's a few things they're gonna just have to work through.
Okay.
That's in terms of a guiding force, I think, we're all hand in hand trying to make this thing work for everybody, so.
But, you will understand, if you don't already, that they're guided by their regulations,
Mhm.
and they will make sure that they meet their obligations under those regulations to service you as the town of Raleigh, but also to be equitable, you'll hear this a lot, to all the towns of Massachusetts. And so those are their guiding principles, is equity among towns, and then generally complying with the regulations that enable the
I can agree with that,
Yeah.
when we went into that board meeting.
Yeah, and they want to be fair and they want to help, but they do have to balance because, as soon as Raleigh gets one, right, then you've got somebody in Worcester or somebody, and so they're very conscious of that.
Okay.
So that's the schedule, such as it is. Any other questions on that?
What was that other than the project?
Okay. Project costs. So, we've been looking at this and trying to figure out, what do we think with the very limited knowledge that we have, a project like this might cost? Because you had in your,
I'm just trying to pull that up.
forget what the number was that you advertised this out
10 to
at?
30.
10 to 30, yeah.
Okay.
12, yeah, 10
I feel like it was, for the OPM, it was 10 to 30, and then
30. It went from 12 to 25. I
Well, that's
think.
what happens when you get to the OPM and then you get to the architect and it always gets smaller. Right? That's what always happens. You guys. All right. So we know it's somewhere between 10 and 30 or 12 to 25. That's a pretty big range, right? So we thought we'd just start spitballing here a little bit and say, well, what do we really think this is? So we're going to do a little benchmarking. and see what kind of reaction we get. So if we were to go out today and build a new school, okay, we would go and say that dollars per square foot, if we started designing today and we're building it, in 18 months or something like that, we're probably looking at somewhere around $470 to $500 a square foot. Right, does that seem
That's reasonable.
about right to you?
Yep.
So let's use just 500, not because of higher, because it's easier math for me, right? And your building is about 90,000 square feet, right? So you're talking, okay, construction cost, hard costs of about 45 million. Does that sound, my math right there? I think so. And then that number there, right, you need to also factor in your soft costs on top of that, for your OPM, your designer, your FF&E, your technology, all of those other things. And that usually starts to fall in, about a 25% bandwidth.
FF&E is fit finisher.
Furniture, fixtures, and
and
equipment. And then when we talk about technology, and these are two allowances that you get from MSBA, and currently they're at $1,200 a student. So you have $2,400 per student, okay, that's reimbursable for those two accounts. Technology, which is things like, smart boards, computers, charging carts, network equipment, that's outside of your hard construction costs. Similarly, when you talk about FF&E, you're talking about, tables, chairs, anything that's not screwed down.
We like to say if you could shake the building, everything that fell out would be FF&E.
That's right.
That's a lot of stuff.
It is. It is. But our understanding is you're eligible for those costs now,
Under LSR.
under LSR. That's a good thing.
That's good news.
The other thing that we understand, right, we're led to understand, is that right now your cap, okay, for projects is, I think it's still like 310?
312.
312, okay? Which is the same as the core program, which is good. Because, if you were doing a new project and we just said it's 500, right, even though you might be saying you're getting 50% back, you're only getting 50% back up to 312. So your effective reimbursement rate is less than that.
312 per square foot.
Right,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
I got that, actually.
Sorry.
Surprised, but I did.
Yeah, and guys,
I'm just gonna be his interpreter.
right, yeah, guys, slow me down, okay? I mean, we live this and breathe this every day, so if you have any questions, just ask us. So,
So
but
the
the,
reimbursement cap is $312 per square foot for this project.
for construction,
For any construction project,
Okay,
right
so
now.
plus $2,400 per student broken down at $1,200 for FF&E and $1,200 for technology?
correct,
Okay,
right?
okay.
And there's other things that are in different buckets too, but those are some of the big ones.
So basically, on a new construction that comes in at $500 a square foot, $188 per square foot is not reimbursable. So the 48.47, 47.87,
And that,
48.47.
and that's just another one of those, that's the way it is. Similarly, you also would have, and you mentioned this before, Brian, you have a site cap limitation of 8%. So if your site costs exceeded that, those would be non-reimbursable items. So the good news here for you is that because this is primarily non-site, we don't have to worry about the site cost cap, hopefully. We also know that those site costs, which are part of the 312, won't be as heavily impacting the 312, which is good. And we also are hopeful, right, that the renovation here, okay, is more cost-effective than building a new building. And we're gonna run that trap for you, okay? We're gonna look at that to make sure that that in fact is the case, but we think that it is. And you would be required, okay, to do that under a core path program anyways. And they may very well require it here, but it's kind of flip-flopped. But the good news is, right, in a strict renovation project, you're renovating because you're saving money, otherwise you would have built new. So here, if you're renovating and saying that, let's just say that the renovation cost is $300 a square foot, you would be under the cap, so your effective reimbursement rate is really 100% of what it's been told to you as. that's very positive. So now we have to just figure out, well, what do we think renovation costs? Depending on the extent of it right now, I mean, we're seeing renovation, depending on how far it is, anywhere from $250 to $350 a square foot, in that range. And so, you know, if you do that math and you shoot the gap right there in the middle and say it's 300,
27,
yeah,
27 million.
you're in that range. You know, is it gonna be more, a little bit less? Yeah, it probably, we won't get that lucky that we're right on. But it's in that range for a hard cost. You know, maybe 25 or maybe a little bit more than that, we think. We don't know yet until we start getting into all of these things. But, you know, when you go out there and you look at renovation and you say, you know, we're gonna be doing a wholesale rework of all of the mechanicals here. And when we do a wholesale work of the mechanicals, you know, we're taking the ceilings down to get at it. We're redoing the walls, right? We might not be moving the walls, but we pulled everything out of the walls. And then we're gonna have to put it all back together. And when you put it back together, that means you have to do all the finishes. When you do the finishes, right, you gotta do paint, you gotta do the ceiling, you gotta do the floors. So it starts to add up, right? And if you have to pull everything off the wall, and you have to pull all your casework off the wall, right? It's cheaper to get new casework to put on the wall than it is to take the old casework off, preserve the old casework, right? And then put the old casework back, right? Because labor, okay, is what drives the bus. Labor is expensive in public construction. So we're gonna evaluate all of those things, but what we wanted to do is we wanted to put our finger up in the wind a little bit and just see if people are thinking that that's kind of where you were headed. Because if it is, that's good. We're gonna continue doing everything that we were doing here and that approach. If it's materially different, that you didn't think it was like that, then we wanna know that now, because we have to factor in, you know, how we want to approach doing all of this work that we have to do. Because as we discussed, we don't want to be in the position, I guess, just to be straight up with you, that we go down and we think we're doing that type of renovation that I was just talking about, and then we give you that number of $25 million and everybody says we thought it was going to be 10. If everybody thinks it's 10, then we should talk about that now. If everybody's thinking it's more along the lines of what we're talking about, then full speed ahead.
So you're estimating 25 million, I mean, very rough estimate now. But 48% of that, or 47, would be paid by the state. Is that what
It
you're
looks that way. And then don't forget, that's just hard
That's
costs.
hard cost only.
You have to add 25% to that.
Actually,
Yep.
estimate 27 because at 90,000 square feet at $300 per square foot, which is right in the middle, is 27 million. You're better off even looking at that number probably.
Yeah, and you know, again, I don't want to be scary, but I also don't want to be, you know, the guy
We
that...
need to be able to sell it to the community.
Right, and I think that, you know, it's better to have that sense up front than everybody thinking it's gonna be low, because then, you know, it just does not come across well in the town.
And what number is the per student reimbursement based on? Is that based on current, projected?
Well, everything's based on your enrollment projection,
Okay.
yeah.
Because they were,
Certification.
they were estimating that the school would drop to 400 students in 10 years, which,
Your reimbursement rate is defined now, right? You have
Okay.
that back from them.
It is, but so I think what she's asking is, so the $1,200 per student, FF&E, and $1,200 for tech. So the $2,400 is based on the 413 that they certified our enrollment as,
Yeah,
Correct.
yes.
not
Your
on
design,
the
not your
502
actual-
kids that are in the building of preschool.
Correct.
wait, they're not including preschool in the number?
That is not included.
Because they don't cover
They don't,
preschool.
that's
There's no
not-
funding that's
Right.
from the state for preschool,
Okay.
It's not
as far as
mandatory, it's
their
not required.
K through 12
So
education.
what do we do? Just not?
No,
Okay,
it's just
so
not
that
reimbursable.
counts-
Have it, it's just
Okay,
whether it's
okay.
reimbursable.
Yeah.
Plenty of schools have
Okay.
pre-K programming.
Yeah,
Oh,
everybody.
so the 400 number was not including the preschool, okay.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
So it'd be the
That number
four,
scared me, honestly.
roughly
Because we had
400
22
times
kids
20.
move in this year, which is
24.
extraordinary. 24?
24.
Oh, good grief. Okay. Town's growing. So,
So
We had
what,
kids out too.
those numbers are all gonna start to be refined. But we thought it would be good to have the discussion with you, right? Because if people started getting up out of their chairs and walking out of the room, we'd say, okay, you know, we wanna be upfront with you.
I think that's the question is, Was everyone thinking, yes, it's a 10 to 15, or we were assuming it's a 25 to $30 million project?
I was assuming it was over 20.
I couldn't have given you a number.
Right, and I think,
No idea.
obviously, with all due respect, I think as far as the town is concerned, is that still,
From my perspective, my vision coming in that, as I stated at the board, that I'm here as the penny pincher and that I am the old Yankee pinching every penny and wanted to be the lowest cost possible. But I knew, I didn't have any thoughts about $10 million.
Okay.
That wasn't gonna happen.
Joe, what's the cost per new construction for the police state, for the safety building looking like right now?
Is that 12?
12.
The new-
We've
Well,
That's
we've
right, that's 11 million,
appropriated
but what's
12.
the cost per square foot there?
The new building, right, I believe, if I looked at that, I think you're carrying today about $430 for straight up new construction,
Okay.
which
So
I
it's
thought,
less than that for a significantly bigger, it's less per square foot for a significantly bigger building.
different building
Different
type.
of-
Right.
different
Very
different
Very,
buildings.
very different building type,
Right.
and also different schedule,
Mhm.
right? Because we're talking, the numbers I'm giving you, okay, are based on the schedule of when we would be building it in the future. And the way that it looks is, the contractor will go and say, what's my start date? He'll look, okay, at the midpoint of construction, and that's what he estimates at, because he's got, he's gonna buy the job out.
the cost escalate every
Escalation
year?
costs.
Yeah, so
Right.
that whole escalation is, looking a couple years out, and construction escalation costs right now are high, so, we're looking, you can be anywhere from 6 to 8% right now, so, that's in the future. So that 430 number, which is, I think, the number you're carrying for the fire station, and then I think you're carrying somewhere around 300 plus or minus for the renovation addition of the police station. Does that sound about right?
Sound about.
So if you use the police station kind of as a barometer, we're probably not that far off in what we're talking about here, because you have, some strict renovation scope there as well as some addition scope there,
Okay.
right? So we're probably in that, we're in the bandwidth, I think, when we start talking about like 300. If we can do better, great, but I didn't want to, it's not 200.
No,
So can I just, if you start at 27 million, you gross that up by 25%, that takes you to about 33,750, and call it 48%, it looks like about 16 million as a
Ballpark, yeah.
cost to the town. And MSBA will let us borrow 20, or can we go out farther than that?
Years?
Years, yeah.
No, you can
I
go
don't think
farther.
they-
I think go
They're not going to restrict that,
I
are they?
think that goes up to what your bond limit's going to be,
Yeah.
so
Right,
They're going to
I
look to you.
think 25 to 30.
25 to 30, okay.
So the 25% is reimbursable?
Yes.
Soft
Yeah, the
costs?
soft costs
The
are
soft costs
reimbursed
are.
at the same rate. That's a
Up.
hard cap on the construction costs.
Yeah, there's like subcaps within, and some of them you'll make and some of them you won't.
Okay.
But, just big picture, yeah, it's reimbursable. So they reimburse, the soft costs and the hard costs.
yeah. Again, just to put the final touch on my feelings on the finances is that we did an override for the police and fire station, and we did pass a $12 million override.
Yep.
And we did pass the override for the Pine Grove School feasibility for $800,000.
Yep.
And we're getting some pushback. But we know that we told them that we're coming back with, hopefully for the Springtown meeting, with the figures for renovating the Pine Grove School.
Yep.
And the whole idea is we want to do it right, but we want to do it for a reasonable cost.
Right, and we're on board with that. We just wanted to make sure how we were defining reasonable. And, it's better to know those things now, right, than surprise you later.
Yeah,
But just to clarify too, so like the 800, that will be reimbursable for the feasibility and schematic. You have, I don't know, you're banning the full portion, MSBA pays their portion, and then you bond
Right.
your portion. So you'd be banning the 34 million
Right,
for the duration of the project.
right,
Bonding
right.
at the end, so.
Right.
Just want to make sure that was clear. I know you do.
but that's, that's shorter money.
That's short money as far as short band costs, yeah.
All right, I'm done. I've got all my bad.
I actually stuck
Okay.
the PCBs before you're done with
Oh,
continuity.
yeah.
No, no,
Not
that's
done with
Andrea.
That's
that.
Andrea.
Oh, is it really me?
No, I can help explain
I
that.
know you can too. Okay, I'm passing out a memo that was written, I think it was just today, actually. I have my own.
Hey, Margaret sent it yesterday.
Yeah.
This is what Margaret sent us, and
I haven't had a chance, I don't think anyone had a chance to review it yet, but. As we alluded to earlier, that we had our testing agencies out today, actually, right?
Yesterday and today.
UEC came out today to do
Yep.
testing. We need to discuss the discussion of PCB testing and our recommendation to move forward with the testing.
So the skinny on polychloral
benzoate or?
bad stuff.
Yes.
Bad stuff.
In the
Yeah.
building.
We don't know.
Pronounce it
That's why we're talking about it.
by feet,
Um,
by feet.
So the deal with PCB testing is you're not required to go out and test for PCBs. Okay, several years ago, it started becoming more prevalent that PCBs were being found in older buildings, and to a large extent, they were being found, okay, in window caulking and masting. And the deal with it is, very simply, is you don't have to test for it, but if you find it later, you're gonna have to clean it up. If you were to go and test for it today, and you find it, you're gonna have to clean it up, no matter what. Whether you do the project or whether you don't do the project, you're gonna have to clean it up. So what we're doing is we're telling you, you don't have to test it, but if you find it, you're gonna have to clean it up. And if you find it today when we test, you're gonna have to clean it up, even if you don't, say you didn't pass this project and you couldn't get it done. You will still have to go and clean it up because it's been found. And so, the way that we look at this is to go and say, we don't want to, our position, I think Pink and ourselves are on the same page on this, is that we would prefer to know now, I think I told you first time out, take your bad medicine up front, so that we go through, we know if it's there, we're able to estimate that cost as part of the project, and we don't find a surprise when we get into it, and somebody who's coming to replace the window, who absolutely knows what type of caulking that is, makes a call, and then the job stops. You find out that you've got PCBs there, you didn't estimate that cost in the job because you didn't test for it, and now you have to do it, and you're in a position that the job's been slowed down. So we look at it and say, PCBs are bad things. They may not be a problem, You've had your windows already replaced once, so that may have all been taken care of, we don't know. But we go and say, it's better to know early so that you can get that cost in there than kind of crossing your fingers and hoping that you don't encounter it later. It's better to know now.
Would we have had that in the 88 renovation? Would there be a report somewhere?
Was that confirmed?
Back,
that-
back
We
in
haven't
88?
confirmed it yet.
Somebody would have said, oh, we did that as part of the renovation?
There wasn't a lot of testing going on for that back then.
No.
But you say it's likely that if there was contaminated caulking, it would have been removed in 1988.
It's
So
part of the
what-
window replacement.
So that's likely.
Would there be a record of that, That's,
We don't.
We don't
But it
know.
also,
It
it
could have
also
just been
leaches,
removed,
it can
yeah.
also leach
Into the,
into the veneer of the building or something like that.
In the old windows, you mean, it could have leaked into?
Prior to the removal.
prior to
maybe.
removing it.
Right.
If it existed prior.
If it existed. So, it's at your discretion, but we wanted to make you aware of it. We don't want to just go out and test for it, and then we leave you with the big problem that you didn't want to have. We want to make you aware of kind of the pros and cons of it, and then, you guys need to tell us, whether we should test for that, or whether we should not test for it. We can always not test for it and carry an allowance, but we don't really know what we should be carrying as allowance because we don't know the extent of it, if it's there.
So is that cost on the sheet for hazardous material testing?
No, because
The test-
Yeah,
The
yeah,
test,
testing
the
is,
testing is,
Yeah.
but not the.
But not the
remediation.
removal, not the remediation.
Right.
Testing's cheap.
So it's only 5,000?
$5,000, yeah.
It'd be less than that. That's just an allowance for what we think
We think
overall testing.
all
would
But,
cost.
testing.
but that doesn't include, if you
Remediation.
find it,
Yeah.
you have
No,
to
no, no.
remove all the
So much-
windows
Just
and
finding it.
whatever
That's
else you
just
find.
That's just the testing.
That's
And
the
then you're
testing, so
obligated
there's the
to-
bigger cost is if you
Yeah,
find
how
it.
much is
That's
it?
correct,
Now
and
it's
that's why we wanna make you
windows
aware,
and-
before we
Right.
test and we give you that,
But that's in the
surprise you may not
renovation.
want, you need to know.
But are you saying you have to test sometime? Eventually, we're gonna have to test it, and it's just a matter of when
Well,
we
if you
do
go
it?
ahead with the project of
Right.
any sort, it's likely that if it is here and you hadn't tested for it, it's likely that will be uncovered one way or another.
Probably will. Somebody will,
And one of the
Well, we know.
contractors will
And then
say,
it
did you
halts the
test
project.
this
Yeah.
material
Right.
before I take this window out?
And then it would shut down
Yeah.
the project and
Right.
we'd have to clean right.
it wouldn't shut it down, but it
Just
it would
slow
be
it
a
down.
hiccup
Slow
that
it
we don't
down.
wanna deal with.
Right.
When you
Yeah.
go to bid for construction,
Welcome.
usually you have, it's already been testing, you have the proof
Plus
of the
also
lab
raise
and
the
everything.
cost.
And if you don't, that's gonna be
significantly.
one part that's gonna be sort of a nebulous amount that the
That's
contractor's
correct.
not gonna know what to
Right.
put in for the
Carry,
bid
right.
amounts.
And they only, they test in the likely spots for, based on their experience.
Yeah,
And, so, but, that's not to say there might not be something somewhere else that they didn't test, but you have a much higher probability of getting it right when you test, but there's a risk.
Can I ask 2 questions? A, how do they test? And B, can you give us a ballpark? I know it's not like asbestos when we did some tiles downstairs and a $12,000 tile job became a $32,000 tile job. And asbestos is easy compared to PCBs, I know that. So are we talking hundreds of thousands?
I can't give you a ballpark because I don't know the extent of it.
Okay, but it could be.
Oh, it could very well be,
So if it was found all over the windows all over this building,
yeah.
we're talking $500,000 on up.
I don't know. It's bigger than a bread box.
So PCB is more expensive to remove than asbestos?
No, well, it depends on the extent of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the levels.
It depends on, if it's just there and they can take all of the caulking out and it's not a problem and it hasn't leached anywhere, it's relatively simple, right? And if you were doing that, you would take that out and it would be handled when they go and do the building, right? They would come in, they'd have a crew that would come in, pull the windows, right? They'd take that out, but they'd be, prepared for it. They take all that and they handle it differently. Whereas if you didn't test for it, right, and nobody knew it was there, it could be removed as part of bulk demolition. Nobody knew it was there and it just goes away. But if it's there and somebody drops the dime, right, then all those other things start to happen.
Is that a reimbursable under the construction costs for the school?
I think it is,
Yeah,
actually.
Really?
Yeah, why wouldn't it be? You could replace the windows or
There's
whatever.
certain, there's
There are
certain
certain,
that are not.
asbestos related, like asbestos
VAT.
floor tile is specifically excluded.
Excluded, right.
And this again gets to equity. The MSBA feels at this point that most schools have removed the asbestos floor tile in their buildings, and that those districts, towns that haven't done that are kind of behind the curve. And it would be an unfair benefit to them if they were reimbursed for something
Right.
that everyone else has already done at 100% of their own cost. But that's asbestos floor tile. I don't think there's been a determination on.
I think it's reimbursed. I mean, we can check on
I
that, but
remember we just did one.
I think it's reimbursed. The only one that I know is not reimbursed is VAT,
Mm.
for the
Does-
reason that John just said.
MSBA doesn't require you to test?
The law
It's
doesn't
the
require
law.
that you test.
The Environmental Protection Agency, yeah.
MSBA requires that you comply with all code laws and regulations. That's their kind of.
If you read it.
But wouldn't you, I mean, it seems like if you had it and you discovered, worst case, that it was, potentially in the walls, and wouldn't that make you say, oh, well, maybe we need to go and knock the whole,
Could very well be.
you know what I mean, change the course of the project?
And there's real-life examples of that in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, where the building, they got into it, they found it, they pumped millions of dollars into it.
And that was a window replacement.
Window
project.
Window
Yeah.
replacement project, they pumped millions of
Yep.
dollars into it, and then they said, they're just chasing it. And they finally just said, no more. and then they're building a new school, and they're abandoning.
And this was
the old school.
PCV?
That was
Same thing.
PCB.
Yep.
Good spread.
It was caulking and
Hmm.
it was a
In that
masonry
case.
too, it was a
How do you
masonry
test
building.
for it?
Right, is that the
Sample.
one?
What is Westport?
Was-
Is what I'm
Oh,
thinking.
I have another one. I have another example, it was all masonry, it was a round,
Yeah.
it was a round building too.
Yes.
Just a question, so, say that everybody decided not to test for it, and then it does, and say it went unfound. Wouldn't that be harmful to like me being nearby or like kids nearby if it's like in the air or something, you know what I mean? And yeah, we lucked out, nobody discovered it, but I feel like there's,
You're kind of out of my area of expertise right now.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, from just the common sense approach that you're
Yeah,
saying there,
it's
yeah,
like
but I don't know if
regular.
it's like
It's
asbestos,
like
you know?
it's
Yeah.
not friable at
Yeah, I
that
don't,
point.
you know, some types of asbestos, you know, so long as it's not airborne and friable, you know, it's not harmful. I don't know that answer on PCBs.
But if you read this, it says that, you know, there are, you know, certain precautions that need to be taken,
yeah.
so.
And then the
Yeah.
other thing, it says in here that all of the windows were replaced in 1988. So have we confirmed that all of the windows have been replaced?
We
That
have,
was probably just a new addition, I would think. I mean, the original school was what, 58?
No, the stuff I read said that all
Well,
the
we're-
windows
I
were
mean, that's
replaced,
part
and
of
the roof
our-
was replaced in 88.
The
Yeah.
whole- in the whole building?
I'm sorry, what do we
Yeah,
read?
I can tell you the,
In the initial project information that went out to the MSBA and part of the application. They were
it's
really good
part
with
of what we're
stuff, I
conforming
think
now,
that was
but
it.
most of the windows that I've seen are all double glazed, and
They
that's
look
not
good.
a technology that was
Yeah.
used in the 50s or 60s.
Boiler roof, windows, 1988.
What about the windows in the AP room up
Yeah.
top? I bet you have a window in the
Yeah.
yeah,
those
I
are
don't,
not-
I don't know, I mean,
Those
you
are around
know,
88.
there's probably some stuff, you know, that was some type of glazing that wasn't, you know, replaced. So,
I still think it's prudent to go ahead and test for it, because then it's over
Yeah.
and done with.
Mhm.
If you don't
Yes.
test for it, then you run the risk of later on the criteria becoming more stringent. And now, even though you didn't test for it when we did this reconstruction 10 years down the line, someone says, you know, well, you've got PCBs a quarter-inch deep, you know, in the stuff, you still have to replace it. you know.
Well, the testing is relatively cheap too, so
Right.
that's not a factor. And I just don't think we can stick our heads in the sand
No.
and pretend it
Hope it
doesn't,
doesn't. I mean-
you know, doesn't exist.
And I
I've
think-
seen things with, you know, lead paint that have gone from, you know, a simple remediation to basically you have to rip the whole window out and dig up 10 feet of topsoil outside your house to get rid of possible lead paint contamination. I don't think we want to take the chance for
No.
I
No.
I
$5
fully agree
grand.
with you that we should not take the chance.
Plus, this is just one more thing that we'll have to decide the next 6 or 8 weeks whether we go core or stay with this. I mean, if we find this, then that's part of our
The
decision-making.
equation, yeah.
For
It's good due
$5,000,
diligence.
you know, I think it's worth doing.
And when will we find out that information? Like, when would the test happen? When would the results be reported?
we'd arrange for the testing would probably be done within the next couple of weeks. And then, you know, they'd send it off to the lab and, you know, we'd know.
And you can start wearing
Weeks
your
after
hazmat
that.
suit to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Safety
don't, I
issue
also,
for the
I
teachers
don't
and
wanna be an
administrators and
alarmist
people who
either
are here
here,
every
you know,
day.
because, you know, again, you know, it may be there, it may not be impactful at all. But, you know, from our perspective, we just wanna make sure that, you know, if that's something that could impact the cost of the project, that we know what that is, going down the road.
So as a committee, we have to vote to decide whether we're going to do the testing or not.
I make a motion that we test for PCBs.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Do you have their names?
Yeah.
Cliff and Larry.
I was just gonna say that.
You're getting really good at this. Okay.
There's a lot of people.
You don't need to mention Larry's name.
Hearing no further discussion, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of testing for the PCBs, say aye.
Aye. Would you check to see if there's any nays, Mr. Chairman?
I will. Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is to confirm or set our future meetings.
Before we talk about dates, this October 11th and 18th and November 1st dates, those are not committee dates? Okay.
When is that group meeting and where?
It is meeting here at the school.
3:30?
Yeah, I think we're
Three or
trying to,
three?
we're trying to do 3:30, yeah.
And my understanding is you're just going to be asking questions regarding the educational program documentation that my group and I filled out over the summer, correct? Okay.
Yeah, and, you know, we'll have a bunch
clarification.
of questions
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, we're gonna, just a little explanation, we're gonna first start with understanding that, and then we also have to fill out with an MSBA spreadsheet they call their space summary, which kind of translates that from the educator's world and becomes a bridge to the architect's, designer's world. It basically lists every room and has a square footage, and existing square footage and then proposed square footage.
Yeah, it's not a public meeting, it's a working
Yeah,
meeting with the
just
staff
working group,
and the
yeah.
professional people here.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we take that space summary and match that up to floor plans.
And we'll be reporting all this back to the full committee too, you know, where we start to see it taking shape.
I have October 4th as the first meeting.
No, we
Did
changed
you
it.
change it?
We tried for
It's
the
the
budget.
I
11th.
didn't see that last meeting. Okay, so that's
It was
been-
just changed
We
this
decided
afternoon.
This
Yeah.
afternoon, so
Yeah.
the 4th is changed to the 11th, now at 3:30 versus 3 o'clock. And then November 1st, would it be,
The 18th,
18th.
October 18th, and then November 1st.
okay. I'll send those out in the Google Calendar too.
So were we meeting every 2 weeks with the
At the,
committee?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, you suggested every 2 weeks for this
Right.
committee. Do you want to continue with that schedule?
I have October 13th, but
I think that works.
Yeah, I think that would be fine, you know, and we can do 2 weeks. If we look and we say, you know, we're probably not gonna have too much to report, you know, and then we can go and say, okay, well, let's move that one out. But I think every 2 weeks right now, it would be good.
So next meeting, October 13th.
What's that?
The Broncos are playing that night,
Oh.
it's okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
What was that?
The
The
Broncos are
are playing.
Oh,
October
saying.
13th,
Make
27th,
it quick.
yeah.
7 o'clock, same time.
November. Why don't we schedule that?
27th and November
November 10th. And then if something comes up and they need to adjust that, Mr. Chairman, we can just have the.
And the 24th is Thanksgiving, so we're not meeting that day.
Right.
Oh, really?
So it's just the 13th and November,
October 13th, October 27th,
13th,
and November 10th.
27th,
okay?
and November 10th. Everybody agree on those? Anybody have a problem with any of those dates?
I may have a conflict with the board I sit on for the town of Salisbury, but let me just check. I mean, I don't want to hold anything up. I can maybe be excused from one meeting here and one meeting there. Available all the time, though.
The
Thanks, Chris.
27th of October is my anniversary. Can I bring my husband? I'm just kidding. Celebrate the next night.
Okay.
Scheduled to 11:10.
Tell them to be quiet.
You're sitting over there, you haven't even noticed.
I have, I've noticed a lot.
So we don't have to vote,
Hearing.
we just set the
We don't need to
Yep.
schedule
Dates.
another.
Any further discussion? Any other comments on the dates? Last chance. Call for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.